Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'll start actually by asking you to describe Glean, and then I'll come back to your background, because I feel like, as Danny said earlier, you were have the perfect background for your current role. So
what is Glean? Who here has heard of Glean? Okay, maybe half the room. Okay. Glean is a work AI platform that what we do is we help you discover information in your organization and then summarize it and act on it. So we ingest basically all of the content from all of your SaaS apps. We index that. We understand permissions and security, and then when it comes time to search for information, we can find what's relevant. And you can also use it, think of it, ChatGPT for your enterprise, ChatGPT that runs across all of your data in an organization. And you can also build other custom apps on top of the information of your organization. So that's what Glean is.
And the reason I say you are perfectly suited for your current role is before Glean, you were the chief product officer at Slack, which is kind of the defining enterprise chat experience, and then also a VP at both Google and Amazon, I think, on A9 on the search product. So a VP of search at both Google and Amazon. So just I feel like you're...
It was meant to be.
Exactly. There's the Steve Jobs, you can connect the dots going backwards. Well, thank you for being here today. So it seems like one of the characteristics of the current wave of AI is that it's kind of easy to get started. You can play around with GPT-4, you can play around with ChatGPT, you can kind of get a very incredible demo working. But making it real and making it real at scale feels pretty hard and elusive. And it seems like, I think Glean is probably the largest scale deployment of enterprise AI out there. Certainly it's kind of in the top 5. And so first question is what does it look like to sort of build it for real as opposed to a compelling demo?
I was at a dinner a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about the same subject, and somebody coined a new phrase, and he said his new acronym is TTFD, which is time to first demo. And because it's exactly what you said, it's so easy to build a demo, and then you get stuck. And when you're coming from it first of, oh, this is really cool, open AI API, let me build something on it, you're not really starting from the first principles. So what does it take in an enterprise? The biggest issue is security and privacy. I met with a CIO who's taking Glean from one company to another company to another company, so he's a real advocate. And he said the first time I met Arvind is the founder and CEO, he did the privacy and security first. And the guy said he did the hard part first. Everybody else is like, let me get something cool, and then I'll figure out about the permissions and how to handle it. And you realize that that's just really, really hard. And so getting that right, understanding how to deal with who can see what from all of your different apps, that's super hard. And it's a lot of, it's a lot of just engineering work. It's a lot of complexity. It's a lot of muck that you have to deal with. So spending time doing that is one of the things. Then also you have to deal with just security, just pure security. You're a little startup and you go and you say, I'm going to index all of your content, every single piece of content you have in Google and Microsoft, in Salesforce. What do you think a CISO says? They look at you and they're like, what? You're going to do what? So getting past that I was interviewing somebody recently, and he kept saying, I can't believe you ever got past that. And so being able to really, to have engineers who understand what it means to build a secure system. So I would be 2. Then the third is really understanding what AI can and can't do. And so as you said, it's very easy to get something up and running, but getting something that actually solves a real problem is much, much harder. So we were focused on the search use case from the beginning. And one thing to note about Glean is Glean was an AI company since 2019. So Glean used AI for search before GPT-3. and was using BERT models that came out of Google. We're using vector embeddings to do semantic search. So all of what people are using, building with RAG today, Glean was doing when it started because all the engineers came from Google and were early Google search infra and ranking engineers. And so did that early on, and that stuff, it's, there's a lot of complexity to it. So I'll pause there.
Yeah. I'm curious, not to get too into the weeds, but how does the how does the security model work? Does Glean run in your customers like their own VPC instances on the cloud? What's kind of the muck to actually get this thing working?
Yes, we do. So our deployment model will be either a SaaS that we will host your content, or we will run in your VPC. We support GCP and AWS. Azure will come next. And so you can deploy it in your cloud so the data never leaves your cloud. And for large companies, that was just really important. So we do have our own SaaS, and some of our customers use our SaaS, and some use their own. And you can also bring your own key for the LLM. So if you want to use your key in your environment, you can do that, and we will let you use your key. So these are the things that really helped in that people can control their environment.
Cool. And how, I think one of the things people are still figuring out is not just how to launch the V1 of an AI product, but how to ship 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and to iterate. What does the iteration process look like once you have a sort of V1 out the door?
We've gotten better at it. So with search, anybody who's worked on search before knows that search eval is different than testing a product, just even the search side before you get into LLMs. So we have a whole eval framework that we use for search that was modeled after how Google does search ranking. And so it's very statistical in nature. You make a change and you have to actually look at all the results. You have to see which ones are better, which queries are better or worse, and make sure that overall it's better, but you're always going to have some losses. And when we do our evals, one thing that's harder for us, most companies that are consumer companies like Google use third-party raters to rate the queries, but we can't use third-party raters because it's enterprise data. So the engineers have to do it themselves. And so so that's the search part. Now on the assistant, it's even more complicated because now you're non-deterministic. And evaluating a non-deterministic output is very, very difficult. When you go talk to AI people building AI solutions, this is like the topic of conversation. And there are companies that are building frameworks for doing this, but nobody's really figured out how to do it. So we've been using, which a lot of people are going to now, is using LLM as a judge. And we wrote, if you're interested, there's a blog post that we put out a month or two ago called the AI Evaluator, which we talk a little bit about how we are using LLM as judge. So that's how we evaluate the changes. And now we have a repeatable process with a framework that took time to build, but that now we use it also for evaluating new models when they come out. A new model comes out, we use our LLM as judge framework in order to figure it out. But there's still a lot of work that engineers have to do, ML engineers, to actually look at the queries, what's working, what isn't, and determine if the change is a good change or not.
What's the intuition behind LLM as a judge?
So there are different axes that we use in order to evaluate. Is it complete? Was there an answer? Is it correct? Do we think the answer is right? And was it grounded? And so really trying to hone in and using different processes and different prompts for figuring it out. It's something like the industry has been doing for a little while of using, like the intuition is like AI is actually better at determining if the AI was right than it was at getting the right answer initially. It's interesting, like if you think about it, using AI to validate AI really does work. And you can even use AI to pull out snippets from your documents. Like, oh, if you have this question, what would be the relevant snippets? And then were they the right ones? Read the document again. So it's just passing it over multiple times seems to be really good at it.
Interesting. I'm curious if you think sort of how this will apply to sort of software engineering more broadly. Like, will the world and most people building software and using LLMs, will they have to start thinking of the world in terms of search quality, and will they have to start thinking about these kinds of things, or do you think this is like a problem that is unique to the Glean space?
I think that AI is a tool. Right now, people are saying this AI company, this AI company. Pretty soon, we're just like the .com. Everybody took .com off their name. And it's the same thing that's going to happen with AI. And so all these companies that are building products are just building products, and it's a technology, you're going to have to figure out and understand. So ML has been around for a long time. People have been using it in their products. They've been figuring out how to use machine learning in different ways. So I think it's just going to be, yes, a part of these products, and people will figure out what they need to do to test it and evaluate it. So absolutely.
One of the, I was reflecting on this because I was chatting with the acquired folks earlier. I started my career working at Microsoft, where you tended to ship software on a sort of 3-year cadence. You were shipping shrink-wrapped software. Ronnie probably remembers this. And then I moved to Facebook, where we shipped the site every single day. And there was, the actual physics of shipping every 3 years versus shipping every day. But then there were a bunch of sort of second order and third order effects. Like there was there was probably 50,000 QA engineers at Microsoft when I was there, because the cost of a mistake on a CD is very high, whereas there was 0 at Facebook, as some people could tell, because as soon as you had a bug, you could just fix it in 5 or 10 minutes. I'm curious, this is a very speculative question, but it feels like AI is going to fundamentally change software engineering in a variety of ways. And is there 5 years from now, as people are developing products based on what you've seen so far at Glean, how do you think software engineering as a profession is going to evolve?
I don't think it's going to go away. So some people are like, oh my God, it's going to change. There are too many hard problems. I think it will change, and very simple programs will go away, they'll be automated. I think that you still will need people who can design systems, who understand how is the LLM doing the right thing or not. But it's going to change, and a lot more of it is going to be spec-based, as opposed to writing code. Just like you went from assembly to programming languages, you're going to be able to code using natural language specifications, but you're still going to need an engineer to figure out how to specify something and how it's going to work. I think what's really going to change is, everybody says the democratization of programming is way more people are going to do way more things. Well, there's been the movement in the industry with no code, low code, and it's been a big thing for a while. Hasn't really taken off, because it's still, even though it's no code, it still was really hard, and you had to understand the systems and how to integrate them. So now I think you're going to get real no code abilities. I think you're going to get people who can build full applications. We've seen it on Twitter already, the 8-year-old who built an application. So you're going to see many more people being able to do things that they couldn't before, and you're going to see that within organizations, solving problems that they couldn't before. So code will get just ubiquitous. I think that's what's really exciting.
Interesting. So kind of every application sort of becomes a platform in some sense, because you can just extend it with natural language.
Yeah, all these AI products that are out there all have interfaces that you can prompt, and when you're prompting, you can do things with them that was not the original intent, presumably, or more and extensions. And I think you're already starting to see that.
So my understanding of Glean, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's kind of 3 primary interfaces to the system in some senses. There's kind of a search-based interface, which you could think of as a Google-like experience. There's a chat-based interface that was maybe a ChatGPT-like experience. And then I think there's a developer product and API. I'm curious, maybe just on the first 2, there's a lot of talk about sort of search and chat and the like. Based on, in the enterprise context, what have you learned about how people use search and how people use chat and how people think about the 2 next to each other?
I will answer that, but I'm first going to correct you. You can build apps on top of Glean with code and no code.
Okay, great.
So there's APIs, and there's also Glean apps that you can just that you can create, which are very exciting.
Cool.
But to answer your question, with search and chat, what are we finding? Everybody knows how to search. They can put in a query. They understand the concept. But if you think about it, when Google started, nobody knew what a query was. So it took a while for people to figure out what a query was and what queries would work in search. But now it works. So go to the search interface. It's pretty straightforward. Chat, people don't know what to do with. They see this box, and it's empty, and they say, what should I be working on today? And it's like, well, how's Glean supposed to know what you should be working on today unless you told Glean what your priorities are? And sometimes people really get it right and they understand it, but there's a lack of understanding of the power of what it can do and how to get it to do that for you. And you see that with ChatGPT too. There's, you've seen the retention isn't at high. People use it, then they forget to use it. It's not built into their workflows. They're not sure how to leverage it. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge is training people what they can do with that box and behavior change. So they remember that they can do that. Like our marketing team uses Glean to create the first draft of a blog post, say, what's all the information about this feature that's in the company? Like, write me the first draft of the blog post. But like, it took a while for them to remember that they could go and do that. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that we need to educate people more. And this is why we recently launched prompt saving and prompt sharing, because that's, we believe, is really going to help people understand what they can do.
Cool. And you mentioned there was this both high code and low code or no code ability to build apps. What have you seen? And you said the sort of the no code stuff is finally going to work. What have you seen on the no code side that is working?
I'm going to give a couple of fun examples. So there's apps that you can build where you give it a constrained set of documents, and then you can ask questions about it, and then there's prompts. So on the app side, a PM in our team wrote an app that could ingest all the Gong calls. So people at Glean, we use Gong to record all of the sales calls, and they get recorded and they get put in a repository. So go through all the Gong calls, put them in a spreadsheet in a certain format, and then say, what are the top requested features? So super practical. If a PM had to listen to every Gong call, they just don't, right? And this is, it can change your workflow. It can make you so much more productive. So that's like a Glean app. On a prompt, we had a really cool, we did a promptathon. So as we were launching prompt saving and prompt sharing, we did model like a hackathon. We did for the whole company a promptathon, and where we had people from different functions spend a day on Glean saying, what prompts could I use to make my day better? And somebody from the sales team wrote a prompt that will, how to unblock a deal. And what it does is it looks in Salesforce at the deal of what are the issues with that deal. And then we have a channel in Slack that's called Wins, and it details what happened in each deal and how it happened. And so then it looks through all the all the deals in the win channel. It finds ones that are similar and were blocked by similar issues as the deal that the person's asking about, and suggests ways to unblock it. Super cool. Instead of having to read all of these. So this is something that a salesperson is like, I think I should have this, and they just wrote the prompt.
I mean, first of all, that's incredible that it works. It almost makes me pessimistic on software engineering, in the sense that, like, there's both of those 5 years ago could have been a startup that got funded and solved that problem. And so, do you think, is there going to be a consolidating effect of this technology, where there are just sort of fewer platforms that you can extend in this way? Or I'm just like, it's very impressive. I'm just curious, are there sort of second order effects you think will come from that?
I think there definitely are. I think the bar will be raised on the kind of companies that will make an impact. But that's true with every technology wave. Every new technology wave, some companies go away and new ones are grown. So we'll find new things that you can do on top of AI, that with this foundation that we don't even imagine that we can do now. And that's what's going to be really interesting to see, well, how do people thread all this together to enable people to be more creative in their jobs and do things that they didn't think they could do before.
If I'm going to ask, just out of personal curiosity, on the high code side of the developer platform for a second, I mean, it strikes me as one of the hardest problems and scariest problems on the enterprise side is, like, you'd love to build applications on top of all this data, but if there's some spreadsheet from HR that has everyone's salary in the company in it, you don't want to feed that into a model. You don't want to accidentally expose that. And so, and obviously that's a very hard problem to solve if you're just a sort of random developer trying to work on enterprise data. And so how do you think about, obviously that's a lot of what Glean has invested in from the very beginning. Like, how do you think about that as sort of core functionality you want to expose to other developers?
Yeah, first, an interesting point about that. The problem that a lot of companies have isn't that, oh, well, are they going to get the security right? It's just that the HR person didn't lock the document down.
Yep.
And it was security through obscurity. And so there was the document about, when I was at Salesforce, there was a big reorg that was being planned, and the HR person didn't put the right permissions, and somebody found it, and then that didn't go well. But that didn't happen very often before, but with a tool like Glean, you can find all this stuff. So we've put a lot of effort into what we call AI governance, that we will let people run it in dark mode first and identify things that maybe are showing up that shouldn't show up. And then we also let people red list and green list things. Like anything in this directory, never show. Or anything that looks like an HR document, never show. But to answer your question, we do offer our RAG as an API. So all of you building startups or building applications on top of enterprise data, you can use Glean as an API. Right now, a lot of our customers use it first party, so they might not use our UI, and they might use integrate into their wiki or something, and then call we have both a search and a chat API. But we are working with companies. I think we just announced this week, DataStax is integrating with Glean, and there's a couple others.
Cool.
And Statsic could if it wanted to.
What are you guys using for experimentation and feature flagging?
We built our own.
Is that the highest leverage use of engineering?
Well done. If you can support our deployment models.
I'm sure that can be arranged. Maybe one of the things I think is curious about Glean is, one of the most interesting, I think, stories/trends overall right now is kind of how search and chat will evolve, especially on the consumer side. Obviously, there's a little company called Google, which has sort of been very search-based for a very long time, and obviously ChatGPT is incredibly interesting. And both with Gemini in one direction and with Search GPT that I haven't tried yet in the other direction, both seem like they're converging on each other. Glean has had both for a while. And obviously you worked on consumer search for a long time. How do you think, based on your experience at Glean and your overall experience, how do you think the consumer information retrieval market will evolve over the next few years?
It's the million-dollar question everybody at Google and at OpenAI are asking. If I abstract away and say there's long-term and there's short-term. Short-term, we needed two different interfaces because people don't understand what to do with chat. They understand search, so you want to make sure that they can get the information they need. You have to behavior change, all that. But if you zoom out and say what's it going to look like in a couple of years, so search started for just finding information. And then it evolved to finding answers, so not having to look for all the information. And then you have ChatGPT, which generates information. And then you have also the ability to take action. So now if you put in finding information, finding answers, generating content, summarizing, generating content, and taking action, you're going to get a completely different interface. So I think in 3 to 5 years, you're not going to have this search and chat. You're going to have natural language-based ability to take actions and find information. When I was in search at Google, people would always come and be like, what's somebody trying to do when they search? Are they planning a trip? Or they're planning a birthday party for their kid? Why don't we do it end-to-end? And the graveyard was littered with projects that people tried to do the end-to-end, but it just never worked because search was so powerful and so much better than anything else around to be able to do the end-to-end. But now with AI, with LLMs, the ability to take actions, with LLMs enabling you to take action more reliably, you're going to, I mean, there's still work to do in the models, but you're going to see, I think, a level of reduced friction to just get things done in natural language. And I think that's really exciting.
Cool. I'm curious, like, there's an element of AI right now. I think there's a phenomenon that can happen, and I think this happened in the late 90s, where a trend can kind of be simultaneously overhyped and underhyped. Obviously there was a lot of hype in the 90s, but it's also, the internet is probably the most important, change in the past 30 or 40 years. I'm curious, again, just from your perch, on the AI side, maybe first, like, what do you think is underhyped? Like, what are people underappreciating in terms of either technology that has come out or techniques that you have seen that are like, this is actually more powerful, more interesting than you think?
I think people at work are not trying to use AI enough in tools that they already have on their desk. Like, it's just, even if it's things like GitHub Copilot or Cursor, or whatever, like AI add-ons to some of these products, or Glean, is people don't, because it's not in your mind that I could do this, and it really can improve your productivity so much. So I think that that's what's underhyped, is that people just aren't using it effectively. And like, prompt engineering is a thing. Like, I've been reading a lot about prompts and how to make it better, and et cetera, and there's like all these little tricks that people just don't understand and don't know, and they try something that doesn't really work, and they're like, okay, this doesn't work. But if they do it, just change it a little bit better, a little bit. Like, tell the LLM that you'll give it a tip. That actually works. It's
like gratuity?
Yes. Like, I will give you a tip if you get this answer right. Huh. It's like wild. I don't understand why that works, but and there's like OpenAI is like some really good prompting guides, and if you put the prompting guide in first and then say, I want to do this, but read this prompting guide first and then build me a prompt to do this. There's a lot out there on the internet. There's a lot out there that you can do. If you are not using AI in your job on a daily basis to do something that makes you more productive, then you're missing an opportunity.
And conversely, what do you think is overhyped?
I think it's going to take a little bit longer. I actually think it's overhyped the fears. I think there are things to be worried about, but I don't subscribe to robots are going to take over the world. Maybe it happens. There is a non-zero probability, but I'm also an optimist, and I think we will figure it out. But I do think that there will be change, and we're going to have to, just like, we're not all farmers anymore. Like, so things will change, and how we do our work will change, but it will take a little bit of time.
I think we're at time, so thank you so much for coming. It was really nice to have you here.
Thank you.